Yes, please, Vikas. Yeah.
Yes, Karthik. Thank you. Thank you, Karthik. So, hi all, and welcome to the second live session of our RTI course. And as you know that we have completed now 7 weeks of our course, and now we are into the 8th week. We thought of conducting this second live session to give you some sides apart from that course, that from the regular weekly content that you have, to give you to this extra content. I have 2 of my teammates, Gayatri Hish and and Patruka, who will be taking you through some new aspects, some different aspects of the Right to Information Act. They will be dealing with the concept of public authority, and will be taking you through the new interpretations, the various perspectives that have been evolved in this context. So without much ado, I will invite his Gayatri Rish to conduct the live session. Gayatri, over to you. Okay. Friends, I think we have some issue with the laptop, with the sound system. We will rectify it. Meanwhile, I will request Jeb Druga to start.
Hello.
Yeah,
Good
over
evening,
to you.
Thank you, Vikas. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the second live session of the RTI course. So, as we begin, there are a few questions with which I would like to begin today's session. The first one is, I would really like if you all interact with me in this session. So, how do you think financial scams come to light? Any idea? Any one of you? I would wait for a couple of seconds and then proceed with the answer. Okay, so at times it so happens that it can only be by virtue of filing a simple RTI application and then calmly waiting. And that is how strong the reach of an RTI application is. Now, the RTI legislation, the RTI Act 2005, interestingly, is a very strong legislation, and this has been accorded by the other countries as well. So the RTI legislation that we have, the RTI Act 2005, has earned itself a 4th place amongst 111 countries in the annual rating of similar empowering laws across the world in the year 2016. So this is how strong an RTI legislation is, the framework of it. Now, what is the benefit of having such a strong legislation? Any idea, like if any one of you could give any responses to it, like if we have such a strong legislation in place, what is the impact that we have out of it? So as I mentioned in the beginning of the session that...
Jay, can I interact with you if the participants are not interacting?
Sure, sir. That would be really great.
Yeah, Jay, I think, RTI is a very empowering legislation, and it gives citizens not only a new right, but also a perspective on governance. And I think what such a legislation does is to reduce the trust deficit between the government and those who are being governed by the government. So I think overall, it's a very, very important and empowering legislation for every democratic country to enact and appropriately implement.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for that answer. And that answer is really, really enlightening and very crisp and to the point. So there are a few scams that only a simple RTI legislation, and by the legislation, by simply by filing an RTI application, they came into picture. Now there is a movie, a very famous Bollywood movie that actually came into it. So there is a movie based on a land scam. And I'll give a hint of it. The movie had the mention of a housing society, that is the Adarsh Society scam. And this took place in the state of Maharashtra. So any idea if which movie am I talking about and what scam is this? Okay, I'll break the suspense and share that what power does a simple RTI application have and why should we be aware of how the RTI system functions appropriately. Now, the movie that I was mentioning is Ayari, and it's based on the Adarsh housing scam. Now, what actually took place is a brief fact about the scam is what was meant to be a 6-story building that was to be built for the widows of the Kargil war heroes. Instead of building a housing society for them, what in turn happened was a 31-story high-rise building called Adarsh Housing Society was built. Now, this building was located in one of the very posh areas of Mumbai, that is a residential area in Colaba. Now, soon the housing society that was to be meant for the Kargil war heroes, widows, became a society in which politicians, bureaucrats, and top military officers got their residences. Now, how did an RTA application come as a rescue in this case? Now, it's very simple. The nexus was exposed by a few activists. One was Simpreet Singh, and he actually filed an RTI in relation to the piece of land that belonged to the state government. But the Ministry of Defense actually culminated into it, and this actually led to the housing scam being exposed. And the then Chief Minister of the state of Maharashtra, Mr. Ashok Chavan, he had to resign. Now, this is one aspect of it. Now, the other aspect, which is another bigger scam, that is the 2G scam. Now, the 2G scam or the telecom sector scandal. Now, this took place somewhere around the year 2005 to 2010. And in this scam, what actually happened was it revolved simply around the auctioning of the 2G spectrum. Now, top ministers, they had allegedly colluded to undercharge certain mobile phone companies while allocating the frequencies. Now, in exchange for a bribe, this reportedly costed the public exchequer a whooping 1.76 lakh crore rupees. Now, again, how did this scam see the light of the day? Now, simply, an RTI was filed by an activist named Subhash Chandra Agarwal, and the scam came into light. Now, the last example that I would be dealing out here is about the Commonwealth Games scam. Now, even in this case, an RTI was filed by a non-profit organization that revealed that the Delhi government had diverted rupees 744 crore funds earmarked for the welfare of the Dalit community to the Commonwealth Games. Now, the non-profit body Housing and Land Rights Network also found that the diverted funds were expended on amenities that existed only on paper, suggesting there was money laundering and corruption. So the point that I was trying to convey with all these three case studies is very simple. that the act has a far-reaching implication only if it is used judiciously and properly. And as Sir said, for any democratic country, you need a legislation of this kind so that the people who are in power, they are kept in checks and balances. Now, this brings us to one of the most important aspects of the RTI Act, and we need to understand it very well. That is, what are the institutions and organizations from whom information can be requested? Uh, any one of you, if you would please
Jay,
like to share your thoughts on this. Yes, sir, please.
Jay, I had a question in mind to you and Gayatri. That is, what is your assessment of RTI Act 2005? Have corruptions or the scandals that we see, have they exploded after the RTI Act, or what is the visibility of the same post RTI Act and pre RTI Act? Because one of the questions that we have to understand is, does RTI deal with corruption directly, or does it have an indirect impact on corruption? So in terms of the corruption index and the transparency index that we look, has India improved in the rankings, and has RTI impacted the same? What do you think about the same? I think the participants would like to probably know the same.
So if I may answer that question, I think RTI Act is the beginning for a good governance. So it actually makes a pathway to the citizens who were otherwise not, the information was not so easily available before. But now I think through RTI Act, the information is easily available. And if we have to talk about whether the corruption has decreased, or whether in the corruption index, India has moved up or moved down, or whatever is the situation, I think RTI has certainly empowered certain section of the people. For example, Jay was talking about 2G scam. If we look into the 2G scam, which started with an RTI, I think it did change the government at the center. It did brought about a change in the government. People were aware of what was happening. So I think there is certainly a start, or what do we call it, as a push in the right direction for the people to know what is happening in the government.
Just to add on to that, sir, like recently in the Corruption Perception Index of 2021, India's rank is 85th out of 180 countries. So this shows that, yes, the legislation has impacted, but then the citizens will have to play a major role in order to bring the real facets of the RTI Act into place. Now, coming back to the questions.
I think both of you are absolutely right. It is important for us to understand that if you look at the preamble of the RTI Act and the objectives and the statement of purpose behind this legislation, corruption has been a very key word, at least a key purpose, a key objective to bring this legislation into effect. However, we know that there are legislations like the Prevention of Corruption Act. We have legislations like the Lokpal and the Lokayukta Act. We have the Anti-Corruption Bureau. We have the Indian Penal Code. We have the Enforcement Directorate under the Money Laundering Act right now that is being established. Corruption has different legislations which are very specific in character and nature, which actually criminalizes the offense and punishes the guilt. RTI is having an indirect impact. I think what it does is probably it brings in an element of accountability. So there is an element of answerability. You can access records, you can access document, and you can actually find out where there is misuse of power, where there is abuse of discretion, and where probably there has been some element of corrupt practices. So that accountability, I think, is a critical element. I think accountability and transparency ensures that there is someone who is watching you, and it's not the CAG or CVC that is watching you. It is ordinary citizens that are watching you, and they can watch you through the RTI Act, and that has definitely kind of an impact on corruption in public life and public offices. So yeah, I think that's how it is. But good, I think we can move on.
Thank you, sir, for the insights. As I proceed, so I would be sharing my screen. Please let me know once it's visible. Is my screen visible?
Not yet, Jay. It's just started to share. Yeah, now it's visible. You can go to full screen mode.
So dealing with the question as to what are public authorities, any one of you would like to share any thoughts or insights into what are public authorities? Okay, considering the silence, I'll take it forward. So under the RTI Act, public authority is defined as the means or body or institution of self-government established or constituted by or under the Constitution, by any other law made by the Parliament or the state legislatures. So this is one aspect in which the RTI Act itself defines what a public authority is. Now, there is the presence of Article 12 in the Indian Constitution that goes on in detail to share about what a public authority is. And Article 12 also mentioned that an institution that has come into existence by virtue of an act passed by the Parliament or a state legislature, municipal corporations, etc., and etc. But then there is a very important case law that actually goes on to explain as to what are public authorities. And that was the case of Ajay Hasya versus the state of Maharashtra, in which Justice P.N. Bhagwati went on and gave 6 elaborate points in which public authority can be determined. Now, one of the points, and out of those 6 points, I'll be dealing with each of the point in very brief. One of the point is, if the entire share capital of a particular institution is withheld by the government, that will be a government entity. That is one. The second is where there is an institution which has or has been getting financial assistance from the government, and for almost all its expenditure, the government is assisting that entity, that will also be a public authority. Now, another aspect of it is when there is a deep and pervasive state control over a particular organization, that would also be a public authority. Next, when an entity is taking out a work or is working in a domain that is of public importance and is closely related to the function of the government, that would also be a public authority. And the 6th point is when a department of the government is transferred to a corporation to carry out its responsibilities. So these are a few aspects that can help in determining a citizen as to if a particular entity is a public authority or it isn't a public authority. Gayatri ma'am will be taking it forward and she'll be explaining with examples as to which entity is a public authority and which entity does not fall under the category of public authority.
So since we have already looked into what are the different facets of a public authority under the Constitution as well as under the RTI Act, let us deal with a case, which is Board of Cricket Control in India, BCCI. So if I may ask a question, is BCCI a public authority? For the benefit of the listeners, BCCI is a corporate under the Corporate Act. It's a company under Corporate Act, but does it fall under the public authority? So is BCCI public authority under Article 12 or under Article 2H of the RTI Act?
I think it is a public authority.
Okay.
After controlling, because it controls so much of the game, and it is has so much control over the finances.
Finances, but does the government finance the BCCI? Is it directly or indirectly financed by the government? Or BCCI has its own finance modules through the auction of telecast rights, broadcasting of cricket rights. So it has its own sources of funding. Does the government fund the BCCI?
So,
Even though the government does not fund the BCCI, the Supreme Court, in its decision, and also recently the Central Information Commission said that BCCI is a public authority because it does the purview of the BCCI is under public function. It discharges lot of public function because the players represent India in the international sports, international arena. Now, in another important case, Subramaniam Swamy versus BCCI, and also
Ma'am,
BCCI, yes, he has a question.
if I may interrupt. So yes, I think Supreme Court also held that there are certain activities like selection of a team that will represent India in, say, international matches, or maybe disqualification of players, umpires. Everything is on BCCI. So though it's a private body, technically it's a private body, but it discharges functions that way. And these are the functions that are usually BCCI is responsible for, which is why I think it is a public authority.
Yes, exactly. So I think Anuja is right. So BCCI is a public authority, though it may not be a strict sense state under the Article 12, but it does come under the purview of public authorities discharging the public functions. So it has its, though it says the finances are through auction, tendering process for the telecast rights of the IPL matches and the international cricket matches to any of the private sports channels. The court has observed that this involves a lot of public money. The government, though the government does not fund the BCCI, it involves a lot of public funding, and therefore it has to come under the purview of public authorities and RTI. So when it comes under the RTI, the Information Commission has said that BCCI must designate Information Commissioner, Chief Assistant Information Commissioner, and also it should have an appellate body. So RTI can be submitted any inquiry regarding the functions of the office bearers. So note that in the BCCI versus Cricket Association of Bihar, the Supreme Court said that the elections of the office bearers of the BCCI shall also come under the purview of the RTI. So they can also be questioned as to the democratic process, whether the democratic process has been followed for the elections for the BCCI. So this was a very, a landmark judgment by the Supreme Court, followed by the ruling of a Central Information Commission, which states that BCCI, though is a private body, it does fall under the public authority. So moving on, is LIC public authority? Is LIC a government body or established under the statutory organization, or is it under the legislation of the parliament? So is LIC a public authority?
Yes, constituted by the Act of Parliament.
Yes, so it is a
public authority. Yes, ma'am, it is a public authority.
And what about the Indian Olympic Association? Yes, Indian Olympic Association.
Yes, ma'am. This also.
Yes, because they come under the Ministry of Sports. So they are also the public authority. So moving on. So what about the Metro Rail corporations? Are they a public authority? Do the tendering process, the contracts from the government and the Metro Rail is open to the public inspection or the public purview? Can we know about the tendering process of allotment of contracts? Can we know about that?
Yes, ma'am, because it is ultimately a joint venture, between center and state. So it is a public authority.
Yes. it is a public authority. Once any contract is awarded to any company, the details of the financial transactions, the amount of work that has to be done, which is a time-bound thing, all can be, we can get an information in the RTI. So what about the IIMs, Indian Institute of Management? Do they come under the ministry, HRD ministry? Are they funded by the government? Are they the
are
public
autonomous
authorities?
bodies, ma'am. I believe IIMs are autonomous bodies.
Mhm.
I mean, usually they are under registration societies, registration act. So,
But they are also under the public purview of the public authorities, and do RTI is also applicable to them.
correct.
And next, what about Infosys? Is it a public authority or is it a private company? The government awards contracts to Infosys on many occasions. Many departments of the government awards contracts for the maintenance of software and their day-to-day administration in the government offices. Is it funded directly by the government? Is it an public authority? Do RTI apply to Infosys?
I don't think it is directly funded by the government,
Yes.
though you would know better. But in my opinion, I don't think it is.
Yeah, Infosys, RTI is not directly applied to the Infosys, but only those contracts which are awarded by the government, they can have a public purview. And moving on, Indian Space Research Organization, is it a public authority? What are the information that we can get under the ISRO? For example, we can get what is the expenditure of any mission like Chandrayaan, Mangalyaan, all those things in expenditures we can get. But there are so many subtle information which cannot be, that we can deal with the exemptions. When we deal with the exemptions, we say what are those subtle information which cannot be applied under the RTI. And most importantly, the discussion now is of judiciary. Can judiciary is judiciary a public authority, and can it be under RTI? So
Yes, ma'am, it is a public authority, and even Office of Chief Justice of India falls under the purview of RTI.
Okay, now there, if I may ask another question. So judiciary as an institution is a public authority. And what about the Chief Justice and the other judges? Do they also fall under the RTI? Can we get information about them under the RTI?
Yes, we definitely get it from that Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Recently, that Subhash Chandra Agarwal versus Supreme Court of India.
Yes, yes.
The Honorable Supreme Court had delivered that Chief Justice of India would also come under the ambit of RTI Act.
Yes, yes, sir. And so because of that, I think the most of the judges also have voluntary disclosure of their assets in the website. So they are also held accountable. And even the CJI or the Chief Justice, the judges, and the judiciary as an institution is applicable. But there are certain debates as to what extent we can get an information, what are the facets, different facets of getting information from the judiciary under the RTI. So moving on, any questions as of now?
One question that I have is, with regard to RTA, we are discussing about public authorities. Deepak ji, may I ask you to mute? So basically, is the definition of public authority under the Right to Information Act and the definition of state both one and the same?
Okay, the definition of state is under Article 12 of the Indian Constitution. And it also has other authorities. So where I think when Jay mentioned about Ajay Hasia's case, the court has elaborated on what are the different facets to include other authorities. Having the functions of a state, though may not be a state, they have the functions of a state. But under RTI, it is section 2H clearly defines what is a public authority. Okay, so moving on. So what when getting from the points of view where what is in public authority. So what it means in an inverted commas, information held under the control of public authority. So now we have understood what is public authority. So when we file an RTI application to have any information, to get any information, so what are the information that is held under the control of public authority? What does it mean when they say information held under the control? So can a public authority, when asked, can give an answer or a query or an information which is not under its purview? To make it more simple, what happens when an RTI is filed in a multi-departmental or a multi-bureaucratic setup? For example, when I spoke about the Bcci, so the query to the Bcci was sent to the Ministry of Sports. The Ministry of Sports had to answer the question whether when the players of India are representing in an international game, so what are the different aspects, what are to be established as whether they are public authority, whether Bcci is a public authority, what is the amount of public amount expenditure being done by the Bcci. So the Ministry of Sports said that Bcci does not come under the purview of Ministry of Sports. So you have to apply to the Bcci. But then the question was whether we can apply to the Bcci, whether it is an RTI applicable institution. So from where it started, and therefore the Supreme Court had to intervene and say that, of course, the Bcci is a public authority. So when we say what is the information held under the control of public authority, the public authority can give those information which is under its jurisdiction. Now, for example, what has happened is we have RTI online. RTI online has been made to facilitate easy access to the information. Now we had to go to different departments. Now, for example, if it had 3 or 4 departments, when the query had to touch upon 3 or 4 departments, now RTI online says you apply online, and there is a chief information officer who actually passes on that application to the whatever department which is concerned. So you get a query from different departments, which is where the information is applicable. And to move on next, what is the meaning of voluntary disclosure? Does the RTI talk about the voluntary disclosure of information by the public authority, or is it only on an application by RTI? Does the RTI says only when you apply the information is made available, or it says there are to be certain information which has to be mandatorily made by the authorities time and again? Is there a provision for voluntary disclosure?
Yes, ma'am, there is a provision.
Yes.
Like,
So,
at specific intervals, they have to keep disclosing information. It should be voluntary. It should not be on the public demand. So it
yes.
falls under the duty, and there is a separate provision for it.
Yes. So Section 4 of the Act says that the voluntary disclosure has to be made by the public authority time and again to update the people as to what is happening, so that through their website we can get to know what is happening in any of the departments or the ministries. And anything which is above the voluntary disclosure, we want to know, we can apply for the RTI. So this is also called as a suo motu disclosure under the RTI Act, and it is certainly not only on the application of information by the public. So moving on, I think Jay can answer this question. What is the time period under which public authorities should update their records?
So interestingly, ma'am, initially there was no such time period that was accorded to public authorities in which they have to disclose information. So when the RTI Act initially came into place, only when a RTI application was put into a public authority, they had to disseminate the information. But now, after 2009, the time period in which public authorities should update their records is in 120 days. So in every 120 days, the public authorities, they have to update their records with respect to various communications that happen inside the offices, various memos, records, and all that that goes inside the office for the welfare of the people, or in which the money of the public exchequer is involved. Now, they don't only have to put that information in their office files. However, they need to put that information in the internet as well. If they are having their own websites, they need to put that information that in a website that is accessible to the public. Now, the next question that comes out here is, what all records or data should public authorities put in public domain? Now, not every data or public information or that goes inside an office can be put into the public domain. So any like responses as to what are the kinds of documents that a public authority should put in the public domain that can be accessible by the people at large? Okay, I'll take it forward from there. So records that involve the working of the public authorities that are being done with respect to a particular contract. When a particular contract is finalized, the contract documents, they should be updated in the company's or the public authorities website. Who are the people who are responsible for the project? What is the amount in which the project is sanctioned? The various emails and opinions and advices, press releases that were released by the government, the circulars, orders, reports, papers, and various other aspects that a public authority actually goes into making. All those aspects should be put into the public domain for the availability of the public. Now, this
Jay,
brings
in
us.
one of the case, I think there was a query that was asked that with regard to disclosure of a member secretary of a concerned government department, the RTI applicant asks for receipts of the petrol expenses of the car. Now, the particular question was, can that information be asked?
Okay, so if the car is a government vehicle and if it is like run for the purposes of the government, then yes, definitely it comes under the purview of the RTI Act, and an RTI application can be sought in that regard. And the information has to be shared with the public, whoever has sought for the particular information. Now, moving on to the next question. This brings us to public information officers. So every setup, every public authority should have a public information officer. Now, what are the duties of a public information officer? So we know that a public information officer is responsible for the RTI application that we send. He has to respond to it. But are there any other duties that a public information officer has to deal with?
Would he want to know the nature of the information that an application is being provided for?
Yes, definitely. That is, thank you, Anuja. That is one of the aspects that a public information officer will take care into. But that only restricts his job only when an RTI application is received. What if an RTI application is not received in a particular office? So what are the duties and responsibilities a particular public information officer will carry out throughout the year, because he is a government servant who is being paid by the government? I'll delve into the answers of this. So as Gayatri ma'am had mentioned just a few minutes back, that there is a concept of voluntary disclosure by the public authorities. So under voluntary disclosure, it is the responsibility and the duty of the public information officer to ensure that all records in the government website in the various offices are recorded properly. At every 120 days interval, it is updated. If there is a new contract that is being advertised, once the contract is finalized, the tender process is completed, the entire information has to be put out in the public domain. Now, this brings us to a question. what do you think about a tender document? When can an RTI application be seeked to a public information officer or a particular public office? Is it when a particular tender is advertised and when bidders are bidding for that particular contract? Or is it after the contract has been finalized? Okay, so interestingly, in this case, the Central Information Commission and the various high courts have held that when a particular tender is being advertised, that time it is a confidential information. But then once the information is finalized or the contract is finalized, it becomes a public document. At that time, all the bidders who had applied for that particular contract, they succumb to the public office, and all the information, it should be available to the public domain. And these are the duties and the responsibilities that a public information officer needs to carry out in order to facilitate the uh, transparency in the government. Now, moving forward, the exempted information. So, Gayatri ma'am, would you like to take the first aspects of the exempted information?
Yeah, now I think when we have understood what is a public authority and what kind of information a public authority can give to the applicant, to the citizen of India, to anybody who has seek the information. Now, it is very important to know that exemptions are also put properly into place. Now, we all know very well that any information which is prejudicial to sovereignty, integrity, security of the country, which has international relations, which has economic considerations of the country at stake, those informations will certainly is not under the purview of the RTI Act. Now, if we look into what is Official Secrets Act, the Official Secrets Act says it's certain information is saved by the government, which is not accessible to the public. So those exemptions are also under the RTI Act. But when we say, but sometimes the government also thinks that certain files can be declassified and can be made access to the public, so which may not be under the purview of Official Secrets Act. Certain things, information which can be declassified and made available to the public, those may not be under the exemption, but they will be available in the public domain of the whatever is the relevant website of the ministry. Now, what is information forbidden by the court? When does the court says that certain information cannot be shared in a public domain? What are those sensitive matters where information cannot be shared by the court? The court says these information is hampering maybe the law and order situation, or where maybe it is against the interest of the parties of the case. So, for example, any legislation which is not applicable, where an RTI is not applicable. I have already said what are those sensitive information. For example, can information can be sought under RTI in a POXO Act, or any juvenile cases being held under trial by the court. Can those information be accessed by the RTI?
No, ma'am, because there is, first of all, if something is not associated with the public interest, then that
Yes.
cannot be sought under RTI.
Yes.
So when you talk about POXO, definitely they have no right to know about the personal information of the victim. For example, the name, address, or the organization that the victim belongs to. These all information cannot be sought under the RTI Act.
Yes.
And even if media tries to post it anywhere, it will be an offense. So that cannot be sought.
Yes. So I think the information about the victim is not available. What about the information about the culprits, if they are offenders? So can we get an information under the RTI in any of the probably a juvenile case or an POCSO Act, is it possible to get an information under the RTI? Does the court entertain such applications, or even an ministry entertain, for example, Ministry of Justice, does it entertain such applications to know the information of either a victim or the culprit? So for, as of now, it's,
Yeah.
yes.
So unless there is an unwarranted invasion, you can seek information. But if there is any sort of invasion, the information cannot be sought.
Yes, exactly. Precisely is the situation or the status as of today that any such special legislation dealing with sensitive matters or the juvenile matters, those information cannot be availed by the citizens. But we can take statistics in general. For example, if you go, the ministry has a voluntary disclosures of certain statistics as to how many cases under the POCSO Act, how many cases in the Juvenile Justice Act, or the cases of in-camera proceedings. All those things, statistics can be available in the website, but not certain details which might harm the interests of the parties. So moving on, what are the other exemptions? As I already mentioned, the trade secrets, commercial confidentiality matters between nation, for example, we have regional associations like BRICS and many such international organizations, treaties. So can we ask the information under RTI what the diplomats talk when the diplomacy or the treaties are happening? Can we ask for the detailed minutes of the meeting? So I think those are all exempted under the information, under the sovereignty, integrity, and such headings. So what are the information received from a foreign government? Those are also exempted under the Act, and also information that would put someone's life at risk. So I think Jay would deal with an interesting case in this.
Yes, ma'am. So interestingly, when you were dealing with the information received from a foreign government, so very rightly, like we cannot access the conversations that take place between our foreign minister and a foreign minister of a different state. But then in the year 2008, there was a very interesting RTI investigation that took place. In that RTI investigation, it was revealed that the union ministers at that time, they had made overseas trips to 200, and that accounted and accumulated almost to 256 rounds of the globe. And this led the Manmohan Singh government, he was then prime minister, to ask all the union ministers to cut on foreign travel. So this is how crucial an RTI application can be. Its aspect can have such far-reaching consequences. And once the RTI investigation was held on union ministers, the similar investigation was also taking place for the bureaucrats in the government. And as on date, currently, the Ministry of the Department of Personal Training and Communications, they now mandate that ministers and bureaucrats, they have to proactively disclose their foreign trips suo motu in line with the procedure that has been laid in place. Now, with respect to the last one, information that would put someone's life at risk. So there is a very interesting case that relates to Prakash Chandra versus the Central Information Commission. So in this case, what happened, there was a person who asked for an inquiry report of a particular murder that had taken place from the Delhi police. Now, can any one of you try and guess as to what was the response given by the Delhi police in this RTI application? Okay, so interestingly, the answer is not only one-fold, it is a two-folded answer. So in this particular case, in the Prakash Chandra case, the SP replied saying that since the matter is ongoing and the investigation is already under process, if we reveal any information, it would lead that the information is being diluted, the investigation is being diluted at some point, and therefore the information was denied. However, Interestingly, in another case, Ravinder Kumar versus the Central Information Commission, in this case, the SP revealed information that too while a police investigation was going on into a particular crime. So now this brings us to a twofold question as to if a particular investigation is going on for a particular crime, can we file an RTI seeking information with regards to the same? Now, the answer is very subjective. It relates to a case-to-case basis. And it also depends as to who is the person who is asking the information. In relation to all other information that we ask from a public authority, we do not need to give a reason as to why are you asking the information. But surprisingly and interestingly, in police cases, when it relates to a particular crime, if a family member is asking for a investigation report through an RTI, it can be disclosed. But then at the same time, even if a family member asks for an RTI, it might happen that the information may not be disclosed. So it also depends on the nature and act of the crime and as to the veracity of the crime. So therefore, this at present is a dilemma as to what is the correct stand as to this point. Now, coming, sorry, any questions?
Yeah, if I may ask a question, can an information be sought by any public as to why an investigation is taking a long time? Can a question be asked as to what is the reason for the delay in investigation?
Thank you, ma'am, for the question. So absolutely, through an RTI, a request can be made to the SP and it will be forwarded to the particular and the proper police station that has jurisdiction for that particular crime. But then, as I mentioned, it depends on a case-to-case basis whether they would respond to that RTI with respect to the delay in the investigation that is being overtaken. Like it absolutely depends on what is the nature of the crime. So if it's a very complicated crime, then they might just reply saying that the crime itself is so big that it's taking time for us to collect various kinds of evidence. And it may so happen that they may say that it relates to a particular crime. And if we reveal any information, it might derail the investigation process. So it has a twofold answer to this.
Okay.
So moving forward to this segment of the lecture, that is first appeal and second appeal. Now, when can a first appeal be filed? Yes, sir.
We can address some questions if they have been raised in the Google Sheet, and this topic can be taken for the next live session. I think Rohit may have that sheet. Do we have any questions, or do the participants want to raise any queries? We can address that for the couple of minutes that we have.
So Gayatri Nair has asked a question. She was there in the meeting a while ago. So her question is, can religious endowments be declared as public authorities under the RTI Act? And this seems to be quite a controversial question, especially when the matters concerning religion and the disclosures under the RTI are involved. Sir, would you like to please shed a light on the response to this?
No, all government religious endowments come within the purview of RTI Act. So the word religious endowments has many connotations. There are private religious endowments, there are public charitable religious endowments, and then there is public religious endowments which are organized by government, controlled by the government. Gayatri Nair, if I presume it right, if she is from Kerala, she may be talking of the Kerala Devasthanam Board. The Kerala Devasthanam Board is a public authority. However, you will notice that it doesn't mean that every other information from a public authority will be shared because it would be evaluated from what is to be disclosed from what is exempted under Section 8 of the Right to Information Act. So any endowment held by the government, created by the government, funded by the government is covered under Section 2H of the Right to Information Act.
Yes, sir. So there is another question that follows up. This is with regard to the lack of implementation of the RTI Act. So, is there any recourse that a citizen can undertake in case a public authority fails to implement, let us say, something like private disclosure that is required to be made, or suo motu disclosures that are required to be made? What is the recourse that a citizen has?
So the information commissions in the past have imposed penalty on the public authority. It's a very rare instance that the information commission have done that, but unfortunately, such a proactive measure from the information commission have been stayed by the high courts, because if you read the RTA Act, especially section 18, 19 and 20, which are about the penalties under the Right to Information Act, it specifically talks about penalties to be imposed on a PIO. There is nothing that looks at penalty on a public authority. So the activist approach of the Information Commission has not been accepted, because we know that the Information Commission is a quasi-judicial body established under the Right to Information Act. They can't expand their powers, and in an activist manner, hold public authorities accountable for non-implementation of Section 4. However, I think Section 4 is an obligation of a public authority. It is expected that the public authorities fulfill that kind of an obligation, and the Information Commission may pull up the PIU. But the PIU is not a single person. It can be a group of public information officers. In the central government, it could be hundreds of public information officers all across the country. It's a collective responsibility. I think it's a responsibility on the higher moral order more than the legal aspect, that every public authority must realize that in the spirit of implementing the RTA Act, it is in everyone's interest to look at implementing Section 4 in a very, very effective and in an updated manner.
So there is one more last query that is there, is whether the RTI Act is applicable to refugees. Now, I do not know in what context this has come, but probably because of the climate change that we are seeing around. So probably the query has come across as to whether refugees can exercise their right to information under the Act.
I think you should answer it, Rohit.
The Right to Information Act is a right that is available only to the citizens. So please note that unless you're a citizen, you cannot exercise your powers under the RTI Act. So that quite answers. Refugees are not citizens, so they are given certain provisions to stay for a temporary status, and this temporary status does not culminate into citizenship unless it is converted into. So till they become a citizen, they do not have the right. That's about the number of questions. I think with that we have also come to the fag end. So I just leave it to the torchbearer Vikas.
Thanks, Rohit. Thanks, sir. And thanks, Jay and Gayatri, for the wonderful session on the public authorities. I hope this session should have complemented the knowledge that the participants gained during our course. And in case there is still some doubt or if some more issues are there, you can reach out to us on the discussion forum, and we will respond to them. So with that, I will thank all.
Because do you want to show the RTA cover page book?
Yes, sir.
Published by Sairam. There are a few participants. In case they are interested, they can definitely refer to that book if necessary.
Yes, sir. I will just show it. Just give me 1 second.
Do the participants who have joined here have any questions? I have a question to Gayatri, Jay, and Rohit. Whether MOOC is covered under RTA? Vikas has a smile on his face.
I think if you are going to answer that question, this would be the last live session. So I think on that, just a side joke on that point. See, anything that like Gayatri explained to you, that where there is state funding, okay, there is an inclination for you to become a public authority. Now, there are different tests which Gayatri explained to you that determine instrumentality of a state for determination of a public authority. By virtue of Section 2H, if you're going to look into the intricacies, MOOC would then become a public authority because of the very nature that its entire funding comes from the government of India. So, and as such, the funding becomes the primordial criteria for determining as to whether it is a public authority or not.
So, dear all, the book that Sir was mentioning is you all can see on the screen. This is our book that was published under the NLSIU book series, and for the past 3 years since the start of this course, we have recommended this book and many more to the students to supplement the knowledge and content that is provided in the course. So this book is available online or no? So you can see the link and access this book.
If they wish to buy it, they can send an email to sira@nls.ac.in.
Yes. So friends, if you want to buy the hard copy of the book is available with us. You can, as Tara said, you can send us a mail and we will share a hard copy with you. So with that, we come to the end of the live session. I thank all the participants, the team members, Rohit, Gayatri and Jay, and the NPTEL team members too, who have been there with us throughout this live session. Thank you all. And
thank you, Vikas. Thank you, Anuja. Thank you, Aparna. Thank you, everyone who has made a presentation and who has interacted to make this live session really lively. Good evening.
Thank you,
Namaskar.
sir. Thanks so much.